Hello.
I'm Ronnie. All right, run it back. I usually say hello, I'm Ronnie, and then you say
Sorry.
I'm Abby.
Okay, we're trying something new this week, guys. It's not going great. Let's start over. Hello, I'm Abby.
I'm Ronnie.
And this is Dragon in the Dragons in the Details, where we pick apart our favorite fantasy series over an undetermined number of episodes. This is, I believe, episode 5. I think we're on episode 5 now of, we don't know how many. Could be 10, could be 20, could be 6. This could be the end. Probably not, though, for being honest. No, it's not the end.
Not done.
We're not done. We have so much more to talk about. This season, we are covering the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros, although we may dip into other series as we see fit, but it's going to be mostly on the Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros. Disclaimer, if you are a first-time listener, welcome. We do talk about everything from the books. This is a very spoiler-heavy podcast. This is not I just want to check it out type situation. This covers everything up through the end of Onyx Storm. So if you have not finished Onyx Storm, save this, come back later. We'd love to have you then. Podcasts are forever. You can read the book whenever you want. The episodes will still be available. It's your own timeline. Don't feel any pressure to finish books. We're all friends here. Anyway, other disclaimer, because these books are sexy books, this will also be a sexy podcast. This will be rated R. This is not for children. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about that one. This week is not a sexy week, though. So if you're looking for some more children, not spicy content, you can enjoy this one with your kids if you want to. Each week, we're going to dive into a specific topic in depth. But as we know, the topics with Rebecca kind of bleed into each other. So we're following that as much as we can, but that doesn't mean we're not going to talk about other things too. We have always done our homework. We're coming with receipts. We will have quotes. We will have chapter numbers. We don't really do page numbers because there's different versions of these books. You know, sometimes they're on Kindle, sometimes they're hardcovers. Who knows? But we've done our homework. This week, we are focusing on the Venin, our creepy, possibly confusing villains. Actually, now that we've done the prep work for this, I'm even more confused than ever when I really think about it. But, our villains, supposedly. And with that, Ronnie, anything you want to say before we get started? Do you want to rate my intro? I don't think that was my best, if I'm being honest.
I feel like it was good. It was much more upbeat than mine, I think. I don't know. We should let the listeners rate it.
Yeah, listeners
vote.
let us know.
Yeah. Should we alternate? Should we move entirely to Abby, or should we stay with me? I kind of vote alternate because I think we have very different styles. But I loved your intro. I thought it was amazing.
Thank you. That was very nice. Can I tell you a funny story that you might think is funny?
Sure.
Okay. So as you know, I don't know what our listeners know, but as you know, I am not on TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. Correct. And this is my first Romantasy book.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But I do manage our Instagram account. Mm-hmm. You manage the TikTok, I manage the Instagram. So obviously the algorithm is pushing things on me, and I've been seeing a lot of reels and memes. To this day, I do not know what they mean, but they say my wife a lot. I am an older millennial. I thought this was a Borat reference for a very long time. I
don't think most people have seen Borat that are making reels.
What is happening here? Why is everyone talking about Borat? I still don't know what it's about. I'm thinking it's an ACOTAR or some Sarah J. Maas, I don't know, thing.
Mass, yeah. It's a Throne of Glass thing.
Yeah.
But you can't look at the comments until you read the freaking series.
No, I'm not spoiled. I just know at some point he says, "Where's my wife?" And I get that. And I know people are excited for Zane to do that in the next book. But I would actually say in general, book Instagram is very good at not spoiling things for people. So thank you to everyone who's on there. That's great for me. I don't know how ACOTAR ends. We're going to talk about this because I'm going to read ACOTAR, and we're going to probably do an episode where I just tell Ronnie what I think happens in ACOTAR without knowing anything.
And I need everyone to just sit with me for a moment on this and empathize, because that's going to be so miserable that I can't talk to you about all of the things that happen throughout the series while you sit there and you're like, I love Tamlin. He's so great. I'll kill myself. Anyways, we'll do it.
Anyway, if you too have not read ACOTAR, if Fourth Wing was also your first introduction, please read along with us, listen along with us. We're not going to start with the deep dives. We'll probably start with some reaction episodes first and then get into deep dives or something. We don't know. We can't tell the future.
Yeah.
But yeah,
we're unplanned in that regard, but we'll do at least some reaction episodes as Abby works her way through it.
Yeah, we have an opportunity here because I have not read these books. Ronnie has. I can make some wild claims and theories, and Ronnie can just sit there and tut and shake her head and say, "You're so wrong." Anyway, on that, Anything else we want to talk about here? Corrections, omissions, social media. I don't think we really had
So
any this week. Or go ahead.
I would just like two things related to some things that I saw in our comment section on TikTok this week. As I think everyone here knows, well, at least on TikTok, people know that I manage the TikTok account because I've posted a couple videos outside of normal course of content there. But I just want to start, and Taylor Swift fans, you hear me on this. We've all been there together, okay? I'd like to start with just some dictionary definitions of specific words. Okay? Okay.
My jaw just dropped, everyone. Ronnie
The
is
first-
coming for you.
The first dictionary definition that I would like to start with is the word transcribe. Transcribe means put thoughts, speech, or data into written or printed form, like in the form of an interview. Example used in a sentence. Each interview was taped and transcribed. It means that things were written down that happened. If you were translating something from one language to another, usually the word translate is used to describe when you're going from writing to writing.
Yeah.
All love. Just
if you guys don't get what we're subtweeting, it's the note at the beginning of every one of these books that they have been transcribed by Justinia, not translated. We love you all. Thank you.
Although I do think, okay, I'm gonna throw a bone on this. I think Rebecca set up readers a little bit to feel screwed in the head on that one because she says transcribed from Navarian into the common language or something like that, into the modern language, something to that effect. So she uses it almost like she would use the word translate.
I mean, I could literally grab the quote, but I'm 99% sure the text has been updated to the modern tongue from Navarian. I can find it right now.
Let's read it.
Okay.
Okay, while she's pulling that up, the next word that I would just like to define quickly from the dictionary is the word blackmail. Blackmail, as a verb, because it can also be a noun, means demand money or another benefit from someone in return for not revealing, compromising, or damaging information about them. That's all.
Right. So, again, I like how I'm just explaining. I have not been part of these conversations. I don't know what's going on, but I believe what you're referencing was our theory last week that Xaden has blackmailed his way back into his seat of power in Tyrrendor.
That the son of a traitor who blackmailed his way.
Right.
So, like, we could talk about that now, too, arguably, as a potential omission from last episode.
Yeah.
But, yes, blackmailing usually would not be equivalent to someone threatening something.
Right. So, like,
unless you're threatening to reveal damaging information.
Right. A lot of you came back and said, oh, no, it was because Llewellyn and I think Ulysses or Felix. I still didn't look up who the other guy was. Bad me, but they were threatening to, like, I forget, but they were threatening.
They were threatening to walk away.
They were threatening to walk away from the
someone didn't get the title of Tyrrendor, of Duke of Tyrrendor assigned to them that's kind of loyal to Tyrrendor, then they threatened to walk away from negotiations.
That is not blackmail. That is threatening. These are different things. Blackmail means you do this for me or I'm going to tell everyone the bad thing you did, right? Different things. I understand that. We know that the first thing happened. More to be revealed on the second thing, I think. But there is a blackmail element at play here. Yeah. All right. And I have the quote now. Do you want me to read it?
Okay, great. Yeah, let's dip back to transcribe.
And you're right. You're actually right. The following text has been faithfully transcribed from Navarian into the modern language by Justinia Neilwart, curator of the Scribe Quadrant at Basgiath War College. I don't care. That's not what transcribed means. Like, Rebecca, like, I believe she was an English major too. She knows what fucking words mean. Like, yeah.
Yeah, so she set you up for failure on that one. I agree that she did. But I think what that actually means is these events occurred and dialogue occurred in Navarian and they were transcribed, written down in the modern language. And then blackmail is a threat to reveal damaging information, not a threat to just do any old thing.
All right.
That said, shout out to the smarty pants on Instagram who came up with the same thing I came up with when watching that clip, which is it the son that did it or is it the traitor that did it?
Right. So the sentence is written in such a way, you are the son of a traitor who blackmailed his way into a title. I literally was texting Ronnie the second I texted her that actual quote. I'm like, oh my God, maybe it's about Fen. Maybe it's not about Xaden. You picked that up right away. Yeah, could be about Fen. We don't know. But Xaden can read minds. So like my money's still that it's probably on Xaden, but I do think there's all of those questions about the lineage and who's the rightful heir. All that is very much in play here. Definitely more to come on this subject.
I absolutely think it was Fen. So I'm glad that it's fun when we disagree on things. I think that Fen was the blackmailer who blackmailed his way into that title. I think he had information on Navarre, participation with Venin, something, because we know that it's a very real possibility that title might not have been rightfully his. So,
which is so interesting. Oh, that sets up Fen as like,
yeah.
Exciting. Okay.
Anyways.
All right. Before we get into kind of the deep dive, because I like to just, introduce the topic at a high level. Ronnie, what do we think of the Venin as villains?
I think the Venin as villains are very interesting in that I'm not sure how to categorize them in my brain. So on the one hand, like Venin in the first book and the second, both in Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, were presented as pretty objectively bad dudes and gals, right? Like not good people, okay? But I think, and a large part of this is obviously driven by Xaden becoming one of them and us witnessing kind of his degradation into this species. I think there's a lot more to them than meets the eye, especially when you think about kind of how and why they came into existence, some of their motives, and then the different like people that we've met. We know that they're not all necessarily aligned all of the time. And so I think there's potential, and we'll talk about it more in the episode, that the Venin have kind of factions within themselves of varying goodness and badness that make it really interesting to think through. Yes, they are the villain from the Empyrean and the Rider's perspective currently, but are they objectively a villain overall, or are they just an opposing side to all of this? That's what I think of them. I'll cut it short because I know that we have a lot to talk about that specifically, but right. That's what I love them for that reason.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I think Rebecca has done this really interesting thing. I think she's made, instead of like introducing like more and more villains, like final boss style, where you like start with the Venin, then you go to like a different villain, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. I think she's done a really good job of making them more and more interesting with each book and giving them motivations and giving them these factions. And especially if you compare them to like the White Walkers in Game of Thrones, who are just this like faceless like mass. You don't know, right? Yeah. There's no thought there. There's no motivation other than we are evil personified. We are coming for you. These are characters, right? They are characters. They have motivations. They may have been people that we cared about, which is so interesting. I'm a big fan. I think it makes the whole series more complex. I think it elevates it. I think it's great. Yeah. We'll keep it short.
Cool.
All right, now for the deep dive. Cue deep dive music. We don't have deep dive music. But if we did,
it'd be fun to experiment.
Yeah, maybe we'll find some.
Maybe we'll find some.
All right. So this episode title is really Venin and what we know. And the reason for that is because we are not really getting into the end of Onyx Storm. That's going to be a separate episode. We're kind of looking at the Venin overall and their lore and their history and what we know about them. We do have some theorizing about who might be Venin, but it does not really include anything about the brother, anything about the Valley, anything about the Seven Wyvern. That's not this episode. That is a future episode to come. So I'm sorry if you guys are disappointed about that, but we like to keep you on the edge of your seats. But this is going to be a more kind of deep dive into what we actually know about the Venin. So to start, discuss the Venin's form of power. Ronnie, do you want to take this one?
Sure. The Venin's forms of power is one of the things I find most interesting about them. So we know that Venin become who they are because they channel power, quote, directly from the source. Super vague throughout the entire series of what the source is. Rebecca is very careful never to say it, but basically everything, and I'll read a few quotes, leads us to believe that the source is the earth. Xaden in Onyx Storm has said, I can feel the source pulsing beneath my feet with its incomparable power, so it's beneath his feet. Jack in Onyx Storm says the source is there, we just have to choose to see it, bypass the gatekeepers, and take what's rightfully ours. And then when they meet the Irids say perhaps the corrupted ones should devour the land in its entirety. Only when they're faced with starvation will they confront the evil they've become. Either they'll die off and the land will regenerate, or they'll confront the abominations they've become and change. And finally, we hear the soul is not kept by the earth as dark wheelers steal its magic. So we are prompted, we're kind of led to water being that the source is the earth, and we know that they channel from there. So we see them, like regardless of what the source actually is, right? We see Venin put their hand on the ground or anything that's grounded, we'll call it, and channel from it. We also know that they can drain living beings' power. So, regardless of whether they're grounded or not, I think, actually, it may only be when they're touching the ground, we know that they can drain power from humans and basically anything that's alive. So, we get a little bit of can they drain the life force as well? We've seen them do that. And then we know that Venin can act as siphons in a way, because we know that Jack has also forced power into Violet's body on the sparring mat. So far we're feeling that they're kind of a conduit in some ways. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna talk about that because it's right. It's interesting. Like Jack on the sparring mat, he's already turned Venin at this point. We know that because he's got red irises or red rims around his irises. Right. I keep going over this passage because I cannot figure it out, right? Like she's very clear that he is pushing power into her, not draining her. He is pushing power into her. And I'm like, why? What is he doing? Like, what's he trying to do here? I don't have an answer, but it's, and it could just be, it was fourth wing. Maybe it wasn't all figured out yet. Maybe she didn't have this like grand scheme of what was going on, but like, yeah, like what you would think if a Venin drains you. They talk about like the desiccated husks, right? Of the dragons and the riders in Resin. And like, that's what it is when someone drains you. It's a desiccated husk. That is not what Jack did to her. Jack pushed power into her. And I don't know why. I don't know why he did that. It's so weird.
Yeah. And I think also they had alluded to, and again, it could have totally been fourth wing, but they had alluded to Jack's signet being like pain infliction or something like that. And so maybe we were just being like misled into thinking that that was a signet related thing. But I think that we shouldn't ignore it. I think it is like a form of power that Venin have, or at least Jack does, right? Where they can actually also excrete power. They can imbue to some.
Well, we know, right. So my mind went down. We know that they give life to the Wyvern, right? Like they create the Wyvern. They channel power into them instead of channeling power from them, I think is the quote. Right. So I was like, is he trying to control her like a Wyvern? I don't know.
Yeah.
I was curious.
It's interesting, right? Like it's one of the only times we see a like power moving in that direction out of Venin.
Right.
And then we know that Venin have signets.
Yes.
So we have seen confirmed signets in Theophany with storm wielding. We've seen distance wielding happen in the Venin. We've seen dream walking, and now we see shadow wielding. We also have obviously some unconfirmed signets. And these are hypotheses on my part. Actually, first of all, before I move on, are there any other confirmed signets that you noticed?
Yes. All right. And I kind of divvied this up differently because I was thinking about what we talked about. I don't remember when we talked about a couple weeks ago about it is not clear to me. What it seems to be happening to me is that there are certain powers that all Venin share. And I have those listed here. Distance wielding is absolutely one of them. We've seen multiple Venins distance wield. We've seen multiple Venin distance wield, but it still seems like the distance wielders grab other Venin when they wield. So I don't know that they share it. 3 of them do it. 3 different Venin have distance wielded.
Agree.
All right. So the signets that all Venin seem to wield, we have fire wielding. So they can all, in Resin, when Liam sees them, he's like, they're all throwing blue flames. They're all throwing fire. Berwyn can specifically throw fireballs, but it seems like they can all create fire and use that. We haven't seen it come back since, I don't think it's come back since fourth wing, but that's what they said in Reston. Earth moving / summoning. So again, in Reston, one of the Venin tries to bring down the mountain like above the town, like, or the cliff. Like she puts her hands up and brings the mountain down. And then I believe it is Soleil, RIP, who stops her. So that is something, and there's only one sage there. So that is something that I kind of assume all Venin can do. Intention reading. So again, that kind of raised flags for me because I was like, oh, like obviously Xaden has intention reading, but I think it was maybe even the same Venin who brought down the landslide in Resin when Violet is fighting her on the back of Tairn, right? She says she learns all my moves really quickly. And then in Iron Flame, I forget, Carr or someone says, we know they can learn your moves.
Yeah. You have to adapt your fighting style.
You have to adapt your fighting style. We know this is intention reading. We assume this is intention reading because that's why Xaden is also so good at fighting, because he can see his opponent's moves and they all have it. So I think we can assume intention reading. We know they're all fireproof. Distance wielding. Theophany has done it. Berwyn has done it. There's a random guy at the end of Onyx Storm who does it. That's when he brings other people.
Yeah. He grabs Theophany and somebody else and just steps and then they're gone.
But Theophany disappears in Basgaeth when she's in the
In
dungeons
Basgaeth,
next
she
to
does.
Jack. Yeah, she
Yeah.
disappears. The clue here, this is why I love Rebecca. She doesn't fucking tell you what's going on. The clue here is when Xaden shows up at the end of Resin and Liam is dying. You don't even think about it. You're like, how did Xaden get here? Like, Sigale is not there. How did Xaden get there? And Violet says, like, a breeze blows the loosened strands of my braid back from my face. Now we know that Garrick is a distance wielder, right? Garrick brought Xaden to Liam and then pieced out. And Violet felt the strands of her braid loosen. She uses the exact same language with Theophany in the dungeon. So when Theophany leaves, she says there was a sudden breeze that rustles a loosened strand of my braid. So the loosened strand of my braid is the key. Distance wielding is happening here.
Yeah, totally. I also think, I mean, anytime anyone is described as disappearing in this series, I now assume it to be distance wielding. So, like, whenever, like, Theophany disappearing in Basgaeth before Xaden, or as Xaden arrived, I don't remember what the timing was.
Yeah.
But as soon as that happened, I was like, okay, we've not heard of anyone disappearing. We've only heard of people moving very, very fast, unless you are an Irid. So, agree. Okay. Then I think we have, so actually, in that regard, like, you've just listed a bunch of signets that we've also seen on the rider side. And I honestly think, before getting to kind of the hypothesized signets that we don't know whether it exists yet, I think there is a world in which every single signet that exists in riders also exists in Venin. And the reason that I think that is an epigraph in chapter 11 of Onyx Storm.
I know exactly what you're about to say.
In the hope and excitement this new development of the bonds between dragons, griffins, and their humans brings, I wonder who has stopped to contemplate the nature of magic's balance. Do we not risk the equal rise of the very powers we seek to yield? And this was recorded correspondence to Lyra.
Yep.
Way, way back. And so I think there is enough merit behind that for us to suspect, like, okay, anytime we see a signet pop up on our side, should we assume that they have it on their side as well? Which brings me to the ones that are, in my mind, non-confirmed, but, like, they're there, which is whatever the one who watches does. We've talked about that being potentially, like, hive mind combined with mind reading, maybe just something else entirely where you can just see the entire world and everything that happens in it at any given time. And then I also think that there's a potential for precognition. And I have no evidence to go off of here, but in Fourth Wing, during the first ever battle brief, it's noted that the wards fell and there was an attack. And there was something Violet was getting at with people needing to know that the wards were falling because the timing simply doesn't work. And Jack Barlow verbatim says, I'm not the one who thinks precognition is a thing, when Violet brings up that the next outpost must have known that they were falling, which confirms nothing since Jack hadn't turned at that point, but it seems like major foreshadowing, given Jack did eventually become Venin, that he brought up precog in Fourth Wing before we ever knew that Eric was even a little bit of a thing. But what
I have two more points on this. I think both Berwyn and Theophany have precognition. So Berwyn, let me find my notes real quick. This is just like it's not a secret. Like when he's dreamwalking in Xaden's dreams, he says you will turn for love, right? Like he knows exactly how Xaden's gonna turn.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
He like has it all laid out, right? Like it's
coming. Yeah.
Yeah, like this is happening. So like I think that Berwyn at least has a little bit of precog. Theophany, I'm pretty sure is precog. And it gets back to the line you said about Bodhi, which also we talked about this. Like, yes, there's a Theophany's probably also an intrinsic as well. The reason I think she's a precog, this is going down conspiracy alley like pretty heavily. But what she says to Bodhi is, "You're almost done waiting. He'll be gone soon. The crown will be yours." About Tyrandor. Bodhi says, "We don't have a crown." That is one of 2 times a crown of Tyrandor is brought up. The other time is in Marin's dream. Violet is walking in Marin's dream, right? You're the future queen of Tyrandor and your people needs you. She hasn't lost her crown. She'll fight for what's hers.
And I remember that because I thought I misremembered it. As I was saying it out loud, I was like, Queen of Tyrandor, and I was like, wait,
have a queen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Could be, but this was, I believe, during the revolution. Or no, it would have been after the revolution, after the rebellion. So like Tyrandor doesn't have a crown yet. But we know that the riders, and this is someone else's theory. I think it's Faithfully Fantasy or Flights of Fantasy. I don't remember. We'll shout you out in the show notes for real this time, because I didn't come up with this theory. But they were saying, we know that riders are better at mind work we know that flyers are better at mind work. We know that their signets personify usually as mind work. What if Marin has some precog abilities? And then this is a future dream, right? Maybe not the cat part, but the queen part, which I could see. But we've now gotten a crown reference twice for Tyrrendor.
Yeah.
I think there's gonna be a crown.
Yeah. I mean, I think also just geographically, like it's so often mentioned that Tyrrendor is like the best defensive position out of any location ever. Like I think honestly the only reason that there's not currently royalty in Tyrrendor is because of like the rebellion and the fact that I don't know. I have other theories about Zayden's family tree that might have led them.
I think we're gonna do a whole Tyrrish Rebellion episode. We have it in our notes to do that. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see if there's enough or if we just kind of end up talking about it as these episodes go. But
yeah, at least a history one though, because we have to also talk about the Great War, the unification.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, we need to do enough there. Yeah. But to round out Venin powers, I mean, I think the only thing. Actually, sorry, did you have something else on that one?
I don't think so. I think there's this idea of that the Venin are actually all sharing power amongst themselves and sharing their signets. We have this too from the flyers and the runes that they make, right? Like, so we know that the flyers all share runes with each other. This comes up when Kat is in the cave with Sloane and the girl who dies, I don't remember her name, and Violet. Like, Kat had gotten some runes from Marin, and Violet was like, you guys share? And she was like, why wouldn't you share? Like, it just makes sense to share. Yeah, I think it's possible something similar is happening with maybe not the higher level signets, obviously, but like the lower level, like fire wielding, distance wielding is pretty powerful, but like fire wielding, earth moving, intention reading, like some of the not as rare signets, I think are possibly being shared, which also means that the writers might figure out a way to share them too.
Yeah. I also think, I mean, actually, it was my last point, which is that we know that the Venin are in some form a hive mind. And I think the fact that dragons hold and share power and can speak into each other's minds, it also makes sense if the Venin can do exactly that. And so it wouldn't even need to necessarily be signet sharing for things like intrinsic abilities. Fire wielding, it would have to be signet sharing. But like, I think that there is also an element of the Venin that can basically speak mind to mind with each other and like use each other and communicate back when they wield whatever power they have to wield to find something.
Yeah, we know that the dragons can have basically like unfettered communication within the riot. I think, yeah.
And block.
Yeah.
When they need to. So it doesn't even really break the concept of them having factions.
Yeah. All right. So in conclusion, we're pretty sure that at least some of the Venin are precogs. They have a bunch of other lesser abilities too. And some of them have unique signets. I think we've covered everything we want to cover. Cool.
Yep.
All right.
How and why did the Venin recruit, Abby?
Okay, I see. I was like, wait, did I only half answer this question? But no. Yeah. How and why did the Venin recruit? All right. You led me to my answer for this question last week.
Okay.
So your precog theory that Asher died because Berwyn went into his dreams set me down this dark hole.
Welcome.
It's like, how is this possible? How, if Berwyn could just be in everyone's dreams, like this is just an unwinnable war. There is no way to stop this man.
Yeah.
I have thought about this. I don't think Berwyn can be in anyone's dreams. And I've been confused for a while, and I think people have been confused for a while, that it's like a sage teaches you, but you turn on your own, right? So like people have their sages, like the Venin say, my sage this, my sage that, but like you turn on your own. So how does that work? And then we get a little bit of an explanation from Jack that the reason why the initiates and even maybe the ASIMs are like can feel each other is so that a sage will come and claim them, right? But obviously, if you're behind the wards, I guess you can turn, but a sage can't come and claim you, right? So how does that work? And we know that Berwyn has claimed Jack, right? Because Theophany says, I will not make the same mistakes with you that Berwyn made with Jack. So we know that Berwyn has claimed Jack. It's the dream walking in my mind, right? So like I don't think that Berwyn can walk into anyone's dreams, but I think once Berwyn knows who you are, knows where you are, then Berwyn can come in, at least behind the wards, right? And get into your brain and start talking to you and start trying to recruit you, basically, if you need to be convinced, if you're not already convinced that the Venin lifestyle is the one for you. So that's kind of, I mean, this isn't a very long theory. This is a short theory, but
Yeah,
I think,
I mean, I don't think it needs to be
yeah,
that long, honestly.
I
Like,
think,
I completely agree.
yeah, I think basically once you've turned, if you're within the wards, Berwin comes and finds you in your dreams and then talks to you.
Yeah, I agree. I totally think it's the dream walking. I think one thing that I noted as I was thinking through this, because last episode, for those who listened, we talked about who is most likely to become a Venin, right? It's usually people who were exposed to power. And I think we were sort of wrong about anybody becoming a Venin. I think anyone can, because we know that they infiltrated the scribe quadrant. But I think it's almost all riders and priestesses, actually, because of an epigraph in Onyx Storm, chapter 57, that states, dedicating oneself to temple work isn't just a noble pursuit. Becoming high priest or priestess is the closest most of us will get to touching the power of the gods. The rest are riders. And so I think there's more to the priestesses than we know about. Like, I think they actually have quite a connection to power.
God, I hadn't even thought about that. The
That we get into that
of
next episode. In the next episode. Yeah. The how, I agree with you, is 100% dreams. The why and like the what makes someone a good Venin candidate, I think we kind of misunderstood when we just said it's probably riders and like whoever else is power hungry enough. I think there is something going on with the priestesses.
Well, my only pushback on that is that we have the line from Jack in the beginning of Iron Flame where Violet kind of asks, I don't have the exact quote, but like, do you guys need to be taught how to wield power? And he says, yeah, like he was like, not if you already know how to use it, basically, but if you're just a layman, if you're just a shop owner and you've turned Venin, implying that can happen. Right.
Totally. Yeah. I think it totally can. But I think like if I'm Berwin and I'm like, who am I going for right now?
But
I think it.
Yeah, I agree with you. But Jack's whole point is that the dragons should not be gatekeepers for magic, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And if I'm Venin, don't I want King Tari to be Venin too, right? He's not a writer. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess the why, I don't necessarily have an answer.
World domination.
I will note. just to yeah, world domination is the answer, I think. But I wrote one more note that the epigraph that we know they're recruiting, it was only in the last 50 years that we realized they were no longer solely coming from the barons. They'd begun to take recruits, teaching those who never bonded a griffin to channel that was what was not theirs to take, to upset the balance of magic by stealing it from the very source. The problem with mankind is we too often find our souls to be a fair price for power. So it was only in the last 50 years. Ronnie, when did Sigale lose her last rider?
I thought Sigale was only 50 years old.
Sigale's last rider died 50 years ago, according to Iron Flame, I believe. We don't know when that book was written, but...
Wait a second. So Tairn is 100.
Yeah.
How many years younger did Xaden tell Sigale she was than Tairn in the Xaden POV chapter?
I don't know.
We're going to come back on this because this is not adding up in my brain.
This might need more digging.
We're just gonna, it might be 20 years. I don't know. I thought it was 50 years, in which case the math's not mathing. All right, we'll come back.
Math's not mathing. Maybe.
But that's an interesting one. Wait, so your point is Sigale's last rider died 50 years ago, triggering what?
Triggering the recruiting. Sigale's last rider, meaning Grandpa Riorson, meaning who we think is Berwin, who can now recruit by going into dreams. This is just another point.
Yeah.
Okay, I do have a slight social media rant, all right? Because people have come at me for my theory that Berwin is
we both arrived there. That is like, I think that's so obvious.
People are coming at me being like, but what about Sigale? What about Sigale? Okay, fine. I hear you. What about Sigale? I think we'll talk more about that in the dragon episode. I don't have a smart answer for that one. However, everyone who says Naolin is Berwin, what about Tairn? Answer that for me, okay? We have this problem with both of these theories.
I have a lot of what about Tairn, though. They don't talk. They're not telling us things. What about Sigale? Sure, but also, what about Tairn with Naolin in general? I don't think that Sigale is a good enough reason for us to not believe this happened. In fact, I think that the fact that Tairn and Sigale have effectively not like defected from the Empyrean, but like separated themselves, and we'll get into this in a second. Yeah. So not a good enough rebuttal. Okay. And on how and why to the Venin recruit.
I guess welcome to fucking Dragon Court. We're coming for you today.
Yeah. I have the dragons. Honestly, were so for the listeners on Friday night when I was doing prep, I texted Abby God, this series is ruining my life. And that was when I was prepping for the dragon episode.
Yeah.
It's ruining my
Dragons
life.
is gonna be fun. Okay. This one's fun too,
Yeah.
though. This one's fun
Yeah,
too.
this one is fun, and it's also kind of hard to ignore dragons in this one, but we'll keep it light. We'll keep it light and fun, okay?
Yeah.
For
Agreed.
why are the Venin strengthening and attacking now? So we know that the Venin have risen to power before, and they were forced back and contained to the Barrens for hundreds of years. I, side note, think this also gets a little bit into the recruiting question. I think it's really interesting that the Venin continue to recruit when they effectively have a finite source of power. Like, they have drained lands, and it basically, from what I can tell, takes the land literally regenerating to recreate that power.
Yeah, but they're expanding.
They're expanding.
This
dragons.
is a chicken and egg situation here, yeah.
And I think dragons can help us answer it. Anyways, we already know that several regions are either confirmed drained or confirmed magic-less for some reason, and maybe they were drained, but we're not really sure, right? The Barrens, drained in the Great War, abandoned by the Griffins and Dragons after the Battle of Gianfar? How are we saying that?
Gianfar was my name. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So effectively drained pre-AU, pre-unification. Then we have Breivik, that was drained in 634 AU. Then we have the Isles, which, in my opinion, are not confirmed drained. Like, they could just be magicless, with the exception of Zahilna and the Irid Isles. But they could have been drained.
More to come on dragons.
Yeah. And again, all of these are surrounding the Bay of Malik, which I've already mentioned. I don't know how strong of a case that is, but they are very much expanding outward from the Barrens. And we know that the Great War ended with the dragons taking the west, the griffins taking the central, and the Venin taking the east. We already kind of talked about my suspicion. Like, Venin Beyond initiates have to feed on power to survive. Like, starved ASIMs and other higher levels of Venin, we know, have been presented as emaciated and weak. So the fact that they're recruiting and strengthening either means that they have or are planning to acquire a raw power source, or expanding to find one, or to find enough land to sustain themselves. And so for that reason, I think it's actually a pretty notable choice to recruit, given every magic source that they have the ability to drain that we've seen so far is like pretty finite. Like, they drain it and that's it. The only repeatable source that we know about at this point is the only repeatable source of power in general, I think, that we know about at this point is Signets with the ability to imbue, like Violet does with the conduit, where she can like continuously kind of regenerate the power within that, because she's doing it like slowly.
We gotta talk about that more.
Yeah, the conduit, I feel like we're really just skating by. And it's runed, isn't it? It's runed.
It is. Well, the rune is supposed to draw her power into the alloy. That's what we're told the rune is for.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but hold on. Let's talk about that. That's really interesting because we know not all Signets have the ability to imbue. We know that the Venin have drained their power sources before. Still, clearly have enough to survive because they've survived. But like, yeah, why is it that some people seem to have limitless power and some don't? Is it because of the strength of their dragons? Does that even make sense? I don't know.
I feel like we don't really have enough to talk much about it, but I think that it's a sneaky indication that there is a form of regenerative magic in that. And the fact that the Venin are strengthening, like, yes, they are overtaking more lands, but, like, they have to have a strategy. Like, they're not mindless White Walkers, to your point. They have to know that once they overtake the entire continent, like, they will drain the lands unless they have something else up their sleeve. So, like, let's put that aside, because I think it's an open question. Like, why are they choosing to strengthen? And I know we have a separate episode on this, but when we talk about the timing of Venin strengthening, I feel like we can't ignore the fact that the Empyrean is actively choosing to bond fewer humans. Nowhere do we hear that fewer dragons are hatching, just that fewer are bonding. And we hear about this in two places. In Chapter 8 of Fourth Wing, Kaori says that fewer dragons are bonding, the wards are weakening, and there are more attacks. And he's also unwilling to say that they're independent of each other. Rebecca makes a point to call that out. And then in Iron Flame, when Violet and Xaden lead a bunch of Bisgaeth riders to Orisha, the assembly notes that they brought 100 riders and 200 dragons. There are double the number of dragons as riders that fly against the Venin and chose to go to Orisha, and they didn't bond at Bisgaeth. Like, why not?
Right, so they're willing to fight the Venin, but they're not willing to bond with humans.
Bisgaeth, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think there's so many explanations as to why that could be, but I kind of boiled it down to two, and they sound the same, but I think the motivations could be different. The simplest is that the Venin strengthening and the dragons not bonding are just causal, and it's the dragons operating on the defensive. So they're not bonding because they know riders are most likely to turn because they can already channel magic, and so they just don't want to hand over more to the Venin. I think that's kind of like cop-out option, but like causal, simple, maybe it makes sense. I also think there's the potential for like the same events, but different motivations, where dragons are refusing to bond for some other reason. Whether it's because they're waiting for children of former riders, internal Empyrean conflict and beliefs, and they're not bonding. And then the lack of magic is driving greater success in Venin recruitment and strengthening. Like, the dragons are gatekeeping more, and so the humans are turning more as well.
Yeah, that definitely could be it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Maybe.
Interesting. I had a completely different theory.
Okay.
But I don't think I'm necessarily right. I think it might be a chicken and egg situation, kind of
I
just
think
like
it is.
yours, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if it's causal or I don't know if it's a reaction or a cause. All right. There are a number of signets mentioned across these 3 books that the quote is always hasn't been seen in a century, right? So they are distance wielding for Garrick, earth wielding for Imogen, lightning wielding for Violet, true precog for Eric, and summoning for Rhiannon, which kind of surprised me. But these are all signets that have not been seen in centuries, in at least a century, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of, so we know that Basgiath, we know that Panchek has been feeding Venin information this whole time, basically, right? However, Panchek would not know about the distance wielding or the earth wielding or the true precog, but he would know about the lightning wielding and he would know about the summoning, right? And those are once in a century signets. So I think you're right. And I think these are all connected, but I think another part of this is that the Venin are like, oh shit, the once in a century signets are coming back.
Yeah.
We have to react to this or they're gonna like
force us back again.
Force us back forever, maybe finish us forever. That's kind of my theory is that.
Yeah.
But I think it's all related. I think we're talking on 2 sides of the same coin here, basically.
Yeah. I think it has to be related, but I think it's an important point, which is, can one side strengthen without the other side strengthening? Like, does the balance just force it? And so I think there's like, maybe it's Panchek giving the heads up, like, hey, this is what's happening over here, but I feel like it also means that it has to spawn there based on what we've heard. Or they have to capture it and it'll respawn. But like, it seems like once a signet is here, like it's here, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great question, right? It's like, okay, the signet is here. Do we wait around and for it to show up on our side, or do we have to go out and get it for it to be on our side? Yeah, I don't know. Which
could be the why, like why Venin recruit. Like if that's the case, if they basically have to take a gamble on timing, maybe they find maybe it's easier and better for them to go get the person who has the signet.
Right.
Than deal with, like, I don't know, a scribe that chooses to channel and then see whether that
because
happens.
We know Theophany was alive for centuries, right?
Yeah.
And Lilith was her balance. And Lilith was like, I don't know, 45, 50 when she died. Yeah. So I think that's all good points. The only other thing, so my theory was basically that it is the signet thing, but basically the Venin seem to have started like acting up again when the marked ones enter Basgiath. Like those 2 events I think happen very close to each other. We know that Garrick and Imogen have these once in a century signets, Xaden as well, although that's never actually said. I don't think it's ever actually said that a shadow wielder is a once in a century signet, and we can assume no one knows about the intrinsic thing, maybe. And we know they might have intrinsics on their side, so I don't know if that's it.
The only thing I can think of is when they say, like, the last time a lightning wielder and a shadow wielder fought side by side. But that doesn't mean that shadow wielding hasn't happened since then. It just means
right.
They haven't
because
fought on the same side.
Right. I mean, it's not Violet. It's not Violet entering Basgiath because they know about, like, we know they're already like increasing their attacks. And it's also not Andarna. I feel like this is another thing that people might think it is. The Venin don't know about Andarna until they're literally infiltrated the Scribe Quadrant. Like Theophany does not know about Andarna until she says, I knew when I heard the scribes talking about it, but I had to see it for myself. And that is because no one knows what Andarna is until until the beginning of Onyx Storm, I guess. But like, they don't even know that she's a 7th breed. So Panchek can't be feeding that information to the Venin. Like, he thinks she's just another black dragon, right?
Yeah. But Theophany recognizes it when she heard it from the Scribe Quadrant. But she did say that there were doubters, so she wasn't fed that information. There's no way she was fed that information. She very much interpreted that on her own.
Right.
Yeah.
The only other, we haven't actually said this, but I feel like everyone knows this. So like the reason they want to go to Basgaeth is like their ultimate energy source, right? Like the hatching grounds it's not because it's a war college, just because it's a hatching grounds for all of the dragons, right? So that Brennan says in chapter 2 of Iron Flame, their survival depends on it as much as ours depends on stopping them. The energy in the hatching grounds of Basgaeth could keep them fed for decades. So that's kind of why, in my mind, they're targeting Basgaeth, but it could be also because that's where all these like kind of once in a century signets are popping up, and they need to get these people while they're all in one place.
Yeah. I think the simplest explanation makes sense, which is we know that Basgaeth is a very powerful source, could keep Venins alive for a long time. They, regardless of whether they have something that makes sense up their sleeve, the only way that they survive is expanding and like getting more power out of the earth. Like, I think in general, I just feel like the Venin strengthening is intertwined with the dragon's refusal to bond. And I actually think it's honestly kind of driven by the dragons. Like, the Venin are very much acting in their own interests, but the dragons are making choices that are making this easier for them. Like, we have heard that this is the dragon's world and humans just live in it. I think Violet says that like very early on in Fourth Wing. Irids don't bond and don't think that any dragons should. And I think the dragons could be pulling back for their own reason, and it's giving Venin the upper hand. And I'll just pause there until the dragon episode because we're getting too much into dragons. But I think that this like could be going down the road of like an original sin of mankind type of situation where like the Venin touched this power and now they are damned. Like, they have original sin. Like, Rebecca.
Oh my God, that's so funny. I thought you were going to say the original sin was bonding the dragons.
No, that too. I think I think humans touching magic is like, is bad news bears to someone. Definitely the Irids.
Yeah.
So, did I even answer the question? Let me go back and check.
Why are they strengthening and attacking now?
Humans are more available and magic is less available. And so those two things together make a lot of sense.
Their quote, like, I feel like when they go outside of the wards, there's some quote where Violet's like, I feel like magic is like stronger than it's ever been.
Wilder. Yeah, she says it's wilder outside the wards.
But not just wilder. Like, I think she literally said, I might have to find it. I think she literally says it's like, I've never noticed how strong magic is before. And Tairn says that's because you're getting stronger.
Yeah. That does happen.
So it's almost like actually the magic is getting stronger, if this quote is what I think it is. But yeah, humans have less access to it, seemingly. Riders have less access to it because there's fewer dragons willing to bond.
Yeah. And also, they actively dampen it, right, with things like the wards, but they need the dragons to do it. So the magic is very much controlled, and I feel like the riders respect it. Like, that's kind of the whole thing with riders. Like, they acknowledge and respect, like, dragons own this magic.
Yeah.
In some regard. Griffins, I still haven't figured out their role. They seem just kind of there.
We should probably go to the next one.
All right, moving on. All right, who taught the Venin runes?
Isaac Mairi. Next question, please. Thank you.
No, go back. I agree with you. He's alive.
All right, Isaac Mairi is the father of Sloane and Liam Mairi. Am I saying their last name right?
I say Mari.
All right.
Mari.
Whatever. Liam and Sloane's father.
Because not everybody is like us, can you explain why it's possible that Isaac is not dead?
Okay, there are two references to Isaac not being part. So we know all of the Marked One's parents were executed by Dragonfire at the end of the Tyrrish Rebellion, which, by the way, very early in chapter 2 of Fourth Wing, we meet Dylan, who is a Marked One, who is saying goodbye to his mother. How is that possible? We'll get back to that later. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. So we know that all of the Marked One's parents were supposed to be put to death in front of their children. Horrible, tragic. However, there are two different times that it is mentioned that Isaac Mairi was not part of that group. So the first one is Liam and Violet are talking at the end of Fourth Wing at the party. I think it's they're celebrating the day that they crushed the Tyrrish Rebellion. Or maybe it's even earlier, I don't remember. But basically, Liam says, yeah, I saw my father put to death. And Violet goes, no, wait, that's not right. His name was not on the death scrolls. And then she's like, oh, what am I doing? Obviously, he knows how his father died. And Liam says, yeah, they killed him in secret, basically, right? That is the first time. And he was like, I was there too. I saw it happen too. That is the first time this is mentioned. The second time is in Aetos with Talia. So Talia says when Violet was like, how could you have left him? You're a terrible mother. What the fuck? She's like, they would have either executed me or put me to death in secret like they did with Isaac Mairi, right? Why would they have treated him any differently? Why would he have been put to death secretly? Was he put to death? Did he fake his death? I don't have the answers for that. What I do know is that General Mairi, his wife, was renowned for her ability to weave runes, right? Like
Yeah.
she was the best.
I mean, she weaved the rune of the freaking century with those rebellion
Exactly.
relics.
She created the rune that created the rebellion relics, putting Melgren's power. And what was it? It was supposed to counteract the signet of the man, of the rider of the dragon who killed them. Like, amazing forethought there, right? If Isaac is pissed as hell that his wife has been put to death, if Isaac has absorbed some of her knowledge about the runes, we also know that the lure in Resin has Liam's family crest on it, right? If all of these things have happened, and if he's pissed as hell and he's like, I'm done with Navarre, I don't think it's a stretch that he turns Venin, goes to the Venin, and is like, I'm going to teach you all runes. We know it has to be someone Tierish, right? Because runes are a Tierish custom. He is the only one who's not really accounted for. In my nine, we know Bodhi's parents are dead. We know Zayden's father is dead. We know where Talia is. We know Imogen's parents are dead. I guess we don't know anything about Garrick's parents, but we haven't really talked about them at all. In my mind, again, maybe this is just headcanon. Thank you for teaching me that phrase. It makes it.
For the listeners, Abby learned what both canon and headcanon meant.
No. I know what canon is. But
okay,
headcanon
fine.
was new. I totally think it's possible that Isaac was like, "Fuck you guys! I'm going to the Venin. I'm going to make them so powerful." Just because he's angry, because he wants vengeance, right? We know that's a reason why people turn. It's one of the reasons that Berwyn lists is vengeance. So that's my theory.
Yeah, I totally agree. I hadn't pegged Isaac quite the way that you did, but I agree he's totally an open question and one of them. I think that the Venin are rampant with the Tierish.
Probably.
Like I think that the Tierish rebellion was sparked and became personal because of how many people from Tyrrendor turned.
Because they didn't have wards, right?
They didn't have wards.
Yeah.
We know that Brennan's hand has a rune on it, and whether you take that to be from Naolin or you take it to be from Fen, who allegedly shot him with a crossbolt, like I think there's something there as well. We've talked about Fen's biological grandfather, who was documented as a grand uncle. Like I think that when I think through all of these different historical events, the Great War, the Tierish Rebellion, we don't learn a ton about what instigated them. We only learn about what they ended in.
Right.
And so I think that the Tierish Rebellion was started because Fen saw or experienced potentially like direct family members, friends, members of his court falling to the Venin, not necessarily being killed by them, but actually becoming them. And I think we're going to find out that like the part of the reason we know so little about Zayden's family tree, like where's Bodhi, like Bodhi's dad? What's going on with him? What's going on with his mother? Like, where are all of they? I think a lot of them are Venin.
I think that's totally, well, I mean, I assume Bodhi's parents are dead. Like, everyone's parents are dead. But
definitely his dad, I think, was executed, yeah.
If I'm Tyrrendor, what do I have to gain by being part of Navarre, right? The wards do not extend to me. My customs are totally different. I have impenetrable cliffs. I have the source of all of the alloy that they need, right? I have the Palladium mines. Like, why the fuck would I bow to King Tari? It makes no sense, right? It just doesn't make any sense. So I totally agree. Like, I think the Tierish Rebellion, the start of the Tierish Rebellion, is going to be a huge part of this. I would be shocked if we don't learn it in book 4 now that Violet is Duchess of Tyrrendor. Yeah.
Yeah. So Isaac being like of them, right, for sure. But I think it's interesting to think too about whether they executed Isaac later because they understood in some way that he had turned and were questioning him for those reasons. I don't know. Pretty interesting.
Well, okay, here's what's interesting, right? I believe what Liam says is they killed him by Dragonfire too, right? But if he's turned Venin, Dragonfire's not going to kill him.
Yeah. If all of them died by Dragonfire, yeah.
My God.
I'm just saying.
My God. You think they're all alive?
I think something, well, we'll get to it at the end of the episode. Anything else on who taught the Venin rune?
Just my mind slowly unraveling.
Okay, I think
this book cannot be that everything we know is wrong. That can't be the way we're going. That would be too crazy. But if even like 10% of the things we're talking about actually come to pass, it will be pretty fucking wild.
It's also not that crazy to think Like Xaden becomes the very thing he despises. Like I totally think that there were rebels that turned, and if the chosen method of death was dragonfire, like you'd think that they would have figured it out by now, right? Because now we know that the Venin cannot be killed by
Yeah.
regular dragonfire.
Yeah.
So like you would think that maybe Melgren would have the foresight at this point to know that anyone that he did that to, if they had turned, would not be dead.
But Melgren
maybe not.
only sees battle outcomes. This was not a battle.
No, I'm talking about him as a general now.
Yeah.
You should know. Yeah, I don't know.
That would be tough. I don't know that. That would be too much, I think, for me. But yeah, I trust you, Rebecca.
Yeah. I don't think they can't all be, right?
Yeah.
But it's interesting to think about. Okay, what is the significance of Wyvern? I think this will also be a relatively short one, but I think we could talk about it for a while if we chose to. So we know that Wyvern are made by Venin to compete with dragons. It's said in so many words. We learn in Iron Flame chapter 50, runes are embedded in Onyx, and they function as the heart of Wyvern. So just interesting side note here. Didn't Violet give Xaden a band of Onyx as a gift?
Yes. Or was it yeah, no, I think it's Onyx.
It's Onyx.
Yeah, it's the roof of Riorson House set in Onyx, I think.
Yeah. So, but we learn, just for context, right? We learn that Wyvern have runes embedded in Onyx as basically their beating heart, because Wyvern fall, we go to check on them to make sure that our wards are working, or really understand that our wards aren't working, and we see that the runes are still active. Wyvern also, we know, are effectively extensions of Venin. Created by them, they die when they're killed, and we also learn that they are basically like blind agents. Like, the Venin will use them to go do things, even if the thing that they do ends in death. So they truly view them as like extensions of them, but we know that they have preferences as well. We also know that Wyvern have had, what is the exact quote? I didn't write this down. I'll talk through the scenario. Theophany is about to drain the ground. Violet climbs on top of a Wyvern and is not drained because the Wyvern has already had its magic altered, or repurposed was the exact words. She climbs on top of a Wyvern and escapes the draining of Theophany, despite Theophany draining the ground around her, because the Wyvern that she was standing on had already had its magic repurposed.
I didn't
So
even
you know that they're repurposed magic as well.
I see. I just thought it was like, yeah, just stand on something, you'll be fine. Like, I thought it was that simple.
Okay, now I'm gonna have to find this.
You're
quote,
right.
but we'll find it.
You're totally right. That's it. Yeah. Right.
So these Wyvern are extensions of Venin, created using runes that are effectively, quote, repurposed magic that cannot be drained either by Venin or the Venin that create them.
I have to get an idea.
Go.
Let's say there is a scenario where you are somewhere where the ground has been drained, where the area has been, the magic has been repurposed. If you were to bring magic back to that land by, say, having dragons hatch at it, are the Venin powerless in that scenario because the magic has already been repurposed?
I don't know what repurpose means though. Like how?
But like, if the ground has been drained once, even if magic is reintroduced, can it be drained again?
Maybe.
Yeah, it is.
Like,
It is.
totally
It is.
maybe.
It is, because what Theophany wants in that scenario, it's when they're facing off an Onyx Storm, what she wants is for Violet to channel from the ground. She's like, this is how you protect yourself when I'm channeling. You channel and my ground desiccation can't reach you.
Yeah.
So that's what she means.
Maybe.
I think that's a fascinating idea.
We know that repurposed magic is safe from Venin draining. Write it down. This is going to be important another time, I'm sure. I do think it's an important principle. She loves things happening like this in the middle of battle. Theophany like talks her through it. Violet scrambles on top of a Wyvern. Theophany drains the ground. Violet is safe. I think there's something there. I'm not saying that that's necessarily specific to Wyvern, but I mean, we see it coming out of Wyvern. And so I think the significance from a simple perspective is they're made to compete with dragons. They can fly. Venin can ride them. I think there's a very literal way where they could become very much like dragons, which is kind of my precog theory, but can I just say it now? Because it's kind of crazy. Okay. You already know it, I think. We know that Mira made this fucking armor for Violet at the very beginning of everything. She made dragon armor by basically going through a molting season with Taina? I don't know how to say it.
I always think it's Tairn.
Tairn? Sure. Isn't the I first, though?
Probably.
Okay,
I don't
it
know.
doesn't
I don't
matter.
listen to the audiobooks. I'm
Mira's
sorry,
dragon.
everyone. I'm sorry.
Mira's dragon. She gets scales from Mira's dragon. She turns it into armor for Violet. It saves Violet so many times. There's no way that it's not significant in some way because we never stop hearing about this freaking armor for all of Fourth Wing and a good half of Iron Flame. We know that in Fourth Wing, chapter 26, Mira says she told her leadership about the dragon scale armor and never heard about it again. We now know that Venin are killing dragons with daggers. Are we going to see Wyvern coated in dragon scale armor?
That didn't even. I thought you just meant the Venin in general. Like the Venin are going to be wearing dragon scale armor.
That too, maybe. But I don't think, like, do we care about the Venin being covered in dragon scale armor if they can't burn to death?
Yeah.
I don't know. But I think that the Venin are I don't think there's too much to I don't think there's too much to read into here. I'm curious your thoughts. I think
Okay, well,
Wyvern are
obviously,
super important.
I think you might be right, but also, are we going the Game of Thrones route where when a Venin kills a dragon, they can reanimate them too? Like if you stick a rune in
With
a dragon,
runes,
now you have a
maybe.
full dragon,
Ugh.
right?
God.
This also gets back to my Isaac Mairi theory, right? Because we know the Wyvern are only
Yeah.
recently coming back. They haven't been seen for thousands of years. They were in the origin story, but we know they
Yeah.
haven't been seen for thousands of years. And
Yeah.
Violet says, like, basically Violet was like, who gave the Venin runes? Is this why we're suddenly seeing them again? Right. And so the
Yeah.
timeline lines
Yeah.
up with the Tirish Rebellion.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that's an interesting. Yes, I think the dragon scale armor definitely comes back. I think the reanimation of the dragons is an interesting question. I have this question. I don't really have much more to say about Wyvern, except that we've been told there's 3 different types. First, we're told there's one type of Wyvern. They breathe blue fire. Then we're told they breathe green fire. In Onyx Storm, we see one that breathes red fire. I think we get a Wyvern comp for each type of dragon, right? I think we end up with 6, maybe 7.
Yeah.
But probably 6 different Wyverns. The black fire one probably being the most
powerful,
devastating.
Yeah.
I have a question. Do you think that the Venin can control other people's dragons? And I'm going to tell you why I'm bringing this up. In Fourth Wing, Jack is dating a girl named Caroline Ashton, right? And when Jack turns, we know that the Truthsayers question her, and she like passes their test, assuming that not all of the Truthsayers at Besgaiath are corrupt. We can assume that she herself is not a Venin. Caroline Ashton does not bond with a dragon during threshing. She's one of the riders that does not get chosen, right? Later on, we see a scene where Jack and Caroline are walking and Jack says, "See, I knew it would work." And then we find out that Caroline has bonded to Glean. Right.
Yeah.
And Jack has turned. I mean, he's only an initiate, so it would be kind of crazy. But like, is Jack controlling Glean? Is that why he was fine getting rid of Bade? Because he was like, fuck it, I have another dragon, you know?
Yeah. So I wrote this down in our next question, but I wondered whether that quote, like, I knew it would work, Jack to Caroline Ashton, had a double meaning, which is, did she channel and then bond Glean?
I don't think so, because she gets cleared by the Truthsayers.
True.
Like, I don't think she's Venin, even though we are supposed to think that she probably is. Yeah,
maybe. Interesting. I do think we're missing a big signet that I would expect to exist, which is basically, like, for Harry Potter readers, the equivalent of the Imperious Curse. Like, where's that? I feel like it has to exist. And it is a form of mind work. So, like, maybe people just get killed, but it's got to exist, right?
Yeah. Well, and we haven't really seen the equivalent of Crucio either, unless we think that's what Jack's signet was. I mean, that was kind of Varish's signet, but not really. Yeah. Well, as much as it pains me to say it, this isn't Harry Potter. Maybe it's not happening.
Maybe it's not happening. I do think it is important, though, to mention the different, I mean, not mention, like, we are still learning the significance, but, like, Wyvern were very much created to compete with dragons. They have different forms of fire, and there's things that continue to be mentioned about the strength of a green fire wyvern versus a blue fire wyvern versus all of those.
The green ones are, like, the fastest. Like, they thought blue was the worst they had to deal with, then they find out the greens are fastest and their fire burns hotter. I don't even think we know. The reds are not even necessarily, like, confirmed. Violet just sees a wyvern breathing red fire, and I don't think we know anything about it yet.
Yeah.
The other important thing I'll bring up, and this ties into our next question, too, with the wyvern. We know that wyvern cannot exist within the wards. Sorry, I meant the next question with Naolin. I know that there is a theory going around that Brennan is basically a human wyvern and is being controlled by a ward stone in his hand. If that is the case, how do you explain him being in the wards? Because he is at Basgiath when they raise the wards, right?
I looked for this in the reread and I couldn't find anything that corroborated it. Like, he's very much there after the wards are
Very
raised.
much there after the wards are raised. Like, he is there. Unless it's...
He mended it.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Brennan is so clearly, at least at this point in time, anti-Venin. His actions are anti-Venin. Like, whatever.
I don't know if I would go that far.
Let's say pro
He doesn't
ward
react.
stuff.
Like, we didn't even see him react to Xaden, and Xaden clearly knew that he could trust Brennan with the information.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
true.
yeah. So I actually brought up that he mended the wardstone, meaning he could have, you know how I keep talking about these people like they're my friends, bent the wardstone to allow griffins to survive within it. Yeah, sorry, bent the runes engraved on the runes are engraved on the wardstone.
Yeah.
Bent the runes engraved on the wardstone to allow griffins to channel. Brennan also healed, like mended.
So you're saying he could be nefarious?
He could have healed it in such a way, intentionally or unintentionally, especially if he is one, in such a way that he could have continued to channel within it.
Okay.
Should we just talk through the next question, given this is where we're going?
Yeah, but maybe you're... Okay, so Theophany is in Basgiath after the wards are raised too. There's a lot of them. But
we kind of just are told that Venin can then be in the wards, and we're just like, okay.
Yeah, right. But in the battle, when they're coming for... Fuck, I don't remember the city. Not the actual last battle in Onyx Flame, but the second to last. So they're not at Drathis yet, but they're coming for Orisha, right? Because the wards aren't raised yet.
They're right outside Orisha.
When the wards do get raised, she has to leave immediately. She's like, fuck. And she runs away, right? And everyone's like, oh, what happened? And then Leothin shows up. So why?
I thought that was because of Leothin. She looked at the sky, saw something, and left.
I love you. Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
But also, like, the firing of that wardstone was different, right? Because it was a firing. Like, when we're talking the raising of the Basgiath wards, that was mending and firing.
They had to fire it, yeah.
Yeah, and firing. But the wardstone at Orisha didn't need mending. It just needed firing.
Yeah, that's true.
But regardless, like, I think it's totally possible that the Orisian wardstone does not allow Venin, because we have nothing that's been presented to us that makes us believe that Venin can exist within the Orisian wards. But it's interesting that you interpreted that as Theophany left because the wardstones were raised. I interpreted it as she looked at the sky. She somehow saw Leothin descending, and she was like, gotta split.
I don't have an answer, but I think that's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So maybe... Okay, whatever. Let's talk about the next one.
Okay, Abby, what do we know? Who do we know now who might be secretly Venin? And you could include Naolin in this one if you want.
Okay. And the reason for this quote, if anyone's wondering, what do you mean, who's Venin? Jack says to Violet when he's imprisoned at the beginning of Onyx Storm, initiates, ASIMs were all traceable to one another, but the Great Hall could fill with sages and mavens, and I'd never know. Neither would you. Makes you wonder who's been channeling here for years, doesn't it? Who's been trading information for power? All right, so I'm going to start. I think what this question was meant to be who is like in power that might be Venin, but I actually want to start with Theophany for a second, because Rebecca throws a quote in here that says, were it not for the physical signs of her lost soul, she'd be stunningly beautiful with high cheekbones and a full mouth, but her skin's eerily pale. She shrugs in a dismissive gesture that reminds me of the Duchess of Moraine, right? We know that Lyra is from Moraine. We now have this Theophany comp to Moraine. The Duchess of Moraine herself, I think, is fairly sketchy in the scenario. Like, she's like decked out in jewels. She's being all weird.
Yeah.
I don't know that necessarily means that the scenario itself has been infiltrated by Venin, but I think this raises the question, the possibility that it's like, okay, we know that they're high up at Basgiath, but are they also high up? Well, we think they're high up at Basgiath. Are they also high up within like the ruling class of Navarre?
Totally think that they are. Like, Basgiath is the beating heart of Navarre, and the Cenarium is the governing rulers of each of the provinces. I totally think they could be infiltrated. I completely agree with you.
Yeah. All right. So I don't think any of my theories are going to be crazy. First one.
We need normal content so
First
that people don't get lost.
Papa Aetos, absolutely Venin. 100%.
For sure.
100%. The reason for that, oh yeah, he's definitely a Venin. One of the assassins he sends after Violet in Iron Flame after the War Games has red ringed eyes, right?
Is that? Yes.
He's a Venin.
He's a Venin.
He also
sure.
says, I have no son. We know that Asher stopped trusting him before he died. Aetos is 100% a Venin.
Venin.
Period.
Confirmed.
End of story.
You heard it here first. Aetos Venin. Okay.
Varish, R.I.P. Definitely Venin. No, don't.
Rest in hell.
Rest in torment, you fucking prick. Varish is definitely Venin. The reason why I think that is because when Violet gets back from her rush to Samara, where she thinks Xaden has been injured, and she's like, "Oh shit, I know I'm going to be punished." I think it's Kaori or maybe it's Devera, I don't know, saves her and is like, "Oh no, she's been cleared of all charges. There's no way we could expect a second year to like resist the whims of Tairn when he thinks his mate is in trouble." Varish says, and then they say, even when we struggle to control the whims of our dragons. Varish says, maybe you struggle. Some of us do not bow to the whims of our dragons. In fact, we influence them, right? So we also know that Bade was being influenced by Jack. The clue is the hazy eyes. It's never straight up said that Solus has hazy eyes, but he only has one eye. Maybe it's hard to get a good look, you know? But basically, this, in my mind, is Venin, that he's controlling his dragons. He's also obsessed with Andarna. Rhiannon literally says he's obsessed with Andarna. So, like, if he has a suspicion that she's an Irid, we know Theophany has a suspicion too. Seems that the Venin are very interested in the Irids. Violet describes his eyes as pale and soulless, and then he is killed by one of the daggers with the alloy in it. So, in my mind, Varish, 100% Venin. Would be very hard to convince me otherwise. The only argument against that is that he was pretty easy to kill if he is truly a sage or a maven. Like, that wasn't that hard. But
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I mean, he gets it unexpected though.
Yeah,
he gets the dagger in a surprising twist by Dane. Thank you, Dane.
He
beginning
was
of the redemption arc.
Hoisted by his own petard on that one.
I also think even if Solus wasn't being controlled, like we know that the Solus Tairn beef goes so far back, and if Tairn is vehemently anti-Venin, then like I think there's definitely a world in which Solus would continue to associate himself with a rider who is Venin, and Tairn at one point says, "If I kill Solus, you're no rider. Not you'll die, you're no rider." So I think Tairn knows. Honestly.
Does Tairn say that or does Violet say that?
I think Tairn says it.
Holy crap. Yeah. Okay. Varish is Venin.
Period.
End of story.
Confirmed.
All right. I have two more to talk about here. One which I don't have a lot to say about. Panchek. I'm not clear that he's Venin. I think he's definitely a spy. Yeah. Ronnie is giving a thumbs down for our listeners. Sometimes we forget this is an audio format.
I vote no.
To even know the name of his dragon, like we know so little about Panchek. I don't know. It doesn't really not enough known at this point. Maybe we know he's working with the Venin. I'm not convinced that he's actually turned though. All right.
I also think that the interactions between him and the Venin make me believe that he's not Venin.
Yeah. Right. They're like so dismissive of him. Like they're Yeah. All right. I want to talk about Melgren for my last one. Do you want to talk about your others and then we talk about Melgren together, or do you want me to just talk about Melgren?
I mean, I didn't have that many that were super meaty that we haven't already discussed, right? Like Jack is obvious. I think there is a case for Carolyn Ashton.
Yeah.
Mostly because like who would associate themselves that maybe it's not the I knew it would work point, but I think at some point her allegiances sway. And I think there is, importantly, like a division of riders that are not Venin but are willing to serve them, like Naolin. Naolin is totally in that camp. I also think that we need to, at some point, and we should probably just do this in another episode, visit the illusions of Brennan's eyes being amber and Violet's eyes looking amber in certain situations. And outside of that,
Asher's eyes are amber too.
And Asher, yeah. And Asher. And we already talked so much about Lilith that I won't even touch that, but like you guys can go listen to really any of our episodes because it comes up in all of them on whether or not Lilith was Venin. But other than that, the last one on my list was Melgren, so I'm curious your thoughts on Melgren.
I am vehemently in the camp that Melgren is not a Venin. I don't think there's any way that Melgren is Venin, because if Melgren is Venin, then Kodag is controlled. And I don't think there's any way that's possible. Like, he is like the head of the Empyrean. If if Melgren is a Venin, then the war is already lost. There is no point in fighting. The Venin would have already taken over, as far as I'm concerned. Kodag gives no indications of being controlled. He fires the Basgiath Wardstone, right? Like, he's so strong, he's so powerful, and he keeps the secret that Endarna is an Irid, right? The Venin do not know that Endarna is an Irid until Panchek knows. So in my mind, there's no way. Like, I get that Melgren's a creep and that he's a dick and that we don't like him, but I don't think there's any way that he's a Venin. I know there's that quote that Violet says, it wouldn't surprise me if he ripped a mask off and turned out to be a soulless Venin. But thinking through the logistics of it, I don't think that can be.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I had him on my list because I think I brought up a long time ago, before we even had a slight inkling that we would have a podcast on this topic, that Melgren could be Venin because we had just learned that sages and mavens could be disguised. And I agree with you generally. Like, I actually think we see through Lilith and who she associates with who might be genuinely nefarious versus not. And we know that, like, Aetos was her right hand, but she kept him kind of at arm's length. Right. And I'm pretty good in my mind that he's Venin. But I agree with you. I think it's unlikely that Melgren is. The only thing that gives me pause, and it's more just a not fully understanding how this balance and signets work, namely whether they need to be apples to apples. It confuses me that we have two precognition signets on one side.
Yeah, but they're different. Now. They're different signets, right? Like, Melgren can only see the outcome of battles, and Eric is a true precog. Rebecca makes a point when Violet figures out that Eric is a precog. There's a line that's like, he's a true precog, not like Melgren, who can only see the outcome of battles. So in my mind, they're not the same signet.
Yeah, and in that case, fine.
I think this is not. I don't see how it. I could be wrong. My favorite line. Yeah. I could be wrong, but
yeah. I think it'd be super interesting if we were wrong on that one. And then I mean, there's the whole Tierish group that I think we just won't touch right now, but we talked about Isaac, and I know that there's theories floating around out there on both Asher and Fen. I think there's frankly more merit to Fen than to Asher at this point, but yeah.
If Fen is a Venin, was he always a Venin? No. He turned after the Tierish Rebellion?
Yes. Well, I don't know about after.
During.
I think during. And the reason that I feel so strongly about someone from Ryerson House being Venin, and it's probably Zayden's grandfather, right? But, like, they are vehement about Zayden being theirs. And I just think that, like, there's got to be some important ties to that. Whether Zayden is, like, deep descendant of Daramore or he has more recent family that has turned. Yeah. So, I don't know.
All right. Good okay. Roundup.
We're running kind of long, so.
Well, we knew it would happen.
We knew it would happen. We're not cutting this one, to be clear.
One line of notes on this question.
On the next one?
Yeah.
Are all Venin bad? Okay. Our next question is, are all Venin bad? I also kept this one pretty short because I don't think there's a ton of evidence, but I think there's clear opinions on both of our sides. We've already talked about the fact that Venin seem to have factions. We've only met, like, two, quote, factions. I don't even know if I can call it that because they seem to have aligned incentives, but they're against each other, which is Berwyn and Theophany. But there's two things that make me think that not all Venin are bad, and we've actually already talked about both of them, but I'll just recap for completeness. In Onyx Storm, there's an epigraph in chapter 48, 472 AU, when Breivik was being drained. And we learn that, I'll paraphrase, actually I won't paraphrase, I'll read it. With the exception of one house, the village was desiccated overnight by a single Venin estimated to be a sage. The only adult amongst 3 survivors described her as astonishingly ageless, hair as black as the day we married, but in place of the age lines I'd expected were bulging scarlet veins branching outward from her red-ringed eyes. So we can take this to mean this sage Venin chose to burn her entire village except for her husband, because he says the day we married, and then he says one of 3 survivors and 1 adult, so they're 2 children. And she did this as a sage. We also know, and we talked about at great length in, I think, episode 3, that as Zayden was turning, he stopped feeling basically everything. Like he said, like, thank goodness I can't feel a damn thing, except for his love for Violet. And so I don't necessarily subscribe to the fact that all Venin are bad. They might actually lose all real feeling outside of love. Like, for some reason, we have been able to pinpoint in 2 scenarios, not just Zayden's, that Venin feel love. And we also know, as Theophany told us, that they lie. So nothing that they actually tell us about their kind can be trusted from their mouths. We can only go off of observation. Curious your thoughts.
So I totally agree with you. And I just had this thought for the I pulled this quote for the Dragons episode, but I think it's relevant here. There's a quote from when Violet is talking about Fables of the Baron, basically. And she's talking about all the things that are discussed in the different fables. One of them is the origin story, right? Which obviously we know. But then there's two different, clearly distinct, separate things. So one is about the soulless venin that drain magic from the source. And the next one is about men who are corrupted by dark magic and become evil, right? And they are listed as two different things. So in my mind, and I can find the exact quote if we want it. I'm going to read it during Dragons. But in my mind, draining from the source. Oh, it's draining from the source and can like turn you insane or something. Right. In my mind, draining from the source does not intrinsically turn you evil. Like it is a choice you made and you have to live with those consequences, but you still have a choice. And that's what Naolin says to Jack too, right? Naolin says to Jack in the Wardstone Chamber at Bad Guy, is like, you have a choice. You don't have to do this. And Jack says, I made my choice. This is done. And I think even Sigale says, like, you don't have to do this. You don't have to turn. And Xaden says it's already done. But basically, I agree with you that just because you channel from the source, that doesn't necessarily mean you are using dark magic or that you have gone bad, whatever we want to infer from that. But Rebecca distinctly separates these things in the Fables of the Baron. And I think that means that we can assume that not every Venin is evil to the bone. I'm sure they're all soulless. I'm sure there's all like everyone interprets them as evil, but we know there's factions within the Venin. I think there's certainly scales of greatness here.
And I think even I'm glad you brought it up because I think even in the Fables of the Baron and the origin story, there's not the evilness is more associated with the pull on power in general, and it's not necessarily exactly tied to where you get it. We know that dragons are demonized in the Fables of the Baron as well. And we know in the origin story that the way that the lines are phrased, it is not clear whether the jealous brother was the dragon rider or the Venin. And so I think it's a little bit all kind of up for grabs. But I think Venin retain the ability to love and care about people that they choose to. It's just hard.
Yeah. I was looking for the quote. I only have a piece of it, but it's another talks about the dangers of wielding power from the ground instead of the skies, as one could easily start drawing from the earth and eventually be driven mad. The ground versus skies thing is obviously interesting. We can talk about that later, but there's a separate quote about turning Venin that's different from wielding power from the ground. Yeah, more to come.
More to come. Okay, Abby, what really happened to Naolin?
All right, I've broken this down into a couple sections here.
I'm so excited for this one.
All right, here's what we have been told. And I have 3 distinct players in this drama that that's about to unfold here. Naolin, Brennan, and Tairn are my major players, right?
Interesting.
What we have been told about Naolin. Naolin was Tairn's previous rider. Naolin's signet was siphoning. Naolin died trying to revive a fallen rider, which didn't work because there's no signet capable of resurrection. And he depleted himself in the process. Brennan then says Naolin didn't fail, but it cost him everything. One quick thing about Rebecca. Every signet that she mentions as never happening, it's never happened, no one has ever done this, no one has done this in centuries, every single one has turned up. Someone has it.
Yeah.
So someone's a resurrector. That's all I'm saying. All right. That's what we know about Naolin. What we know about Brennan. Fen killed Brennan, shot him with an arrow, is what we've been told. Oh, Brennan has a rune-shaped scar on his palm. Wyvern are controlled by runes. Brennan hid in the caves of Tyrrendor with the other dragons and Tyrrish citizens for an undetermined amount of time after he was shot by Fen. Brennan has amber eyes. So does Violet. It's very hard for Brennan to mend himself. We've talked about this. When Venin drain you, they leave gray handprints. Brennan can go inside the ward. So we already talked about that. That was just a note I had.
Yep.
What we know about Tairn. Tairn has not been seen for the 5 years prior to the start of Fourth Wing. This is in line with when Naolin dies in the timeline. This lines up with the Tyrrish Rebellion. Tairn has not been seen since Naolin died. Tairn feels sorrow after Xaden channels, right? She says, and Darna says, Sigale has gone quiet, and Tairn smells of rage and sorrow. Why? Tairn doesn't care about Xaden. We'll get to that.
Mm-hmm.
I have a note here, but that's not a Tairn note. That's really a Brennan note. Siphons don't leave marks on people when they imbue them with power. All right.
We learned from Sloan.
Right.
Yes.
We learned that from Sloan. So this is kind of everything we know right now. So basically, as far as I'm concerned, there's two ways that Brennan could have come back. The first one, right, is Naolin channels from the source. So Naolin channels from the ground, gives his power, imbues Brennan, basically, right? Because Naolin is a siphon. He can't mend Brennan. He can give him energy, but he can't mend him himself, right? So I guess my question there, if Naolin is channeling from the source, and if he is giving that magic to Brennan, what does that mean for Brennan? Like, is Brennan also using dark magic in that case to mend himself? Yes, I see a raised hand.
I've raised my hand. I think that is a possible reason that the rune exists.
Fascinating.
I think that rune could have been tempered to basically protect, like, or change the magic that flowed into Brennan such that it would not kill his soul.
Interesting.
Because it's gray, it's a scar. It doesn't quite look like it's still active from what we can tell. It's not like he has like brick of onyx in his palm.
I have follow-up thoughts
It's
on
a
that
rune.
one. But yeah.
Okay, it's a rune-shaped scar. Anyways, I think that could have been a use for the rune.
Okay. All right. That's fascinating. Yeah. All right. So in this, if this is the scenario, and this is the only way I really see it working, if Naolin is siphoning, if Naolin is saving Brennan's life, right? It has to be, they're at the end of a battle, right? We can assume that it is very similar to the end of the battle at Drathis. Everyone is exhausted. No one has the energy. And Naolin cannot mend Brennan. Brennan has to mend himself. I think he channels from the ground. The question, it's a twofold question, right? If you channel that power but don't use it, do you turn Venin? If you use that power but don't channel it, do you turn Venin? I think I think this is the scenario that Rebecca's setting us up for, right?
Mm-hmm.
What does all this mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I have the quote, we've talked about this, Jack on the mat with Violet and Fourth Wing, where he seems to be imbuing her with some kind of power, right? So if this is what Naolin did, where he imbued Brennan, Violet is not a Venin as far as we know, right? So that would mean that Brennan is not a Venin, but maybe Naolin is.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my top theory. Like, Naolin channeled, Brennan used that magic. We do not really understand what the implications of that are yet.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that we know Brennan is still alive, but maybe that Naolin has turned and is off with the venom. The rune-shaped scar. I like your theory a lot. I want to go with that one. My follow-up theory to it, though, is that Rebecca tells us that there are delayed activation runes, right? So they are runes that are tempered to be turned on at another point in time. So is that what's in Brennan, right? Like he is fine now, and basically he's a sleeper agent that the venom will activate when they need him.
Interesting. I mean, people love to talk about Brennan being potentially nefarious.
I know he's got an orange dragon.
Me included, honestly. But so does Imogen, so I'm not
Well, I'm starting to see all this shit about Imogen being sketchy. I'm like, don't you fucking talk about Imogen that way.
I'm not team Imogen is sketchy. Yeah. I mean, I think the way that you have outlined it is the most likely scenario given everything that we've been told, assuming everything we've been told is correct, right? That Naolin is Venin. He channeled from the earth to save Brennan. But my response to this question was, I think the whole thing with Brennan's death sounds off to me. It just smells wrong.
Yeah.
Like, I think, right, like, we have no evidence that a siphon lending power to a mender could save the mender's life. Like, Brennan had been shot with an arrow, dying. And we know that mending yourself, is way harder than mending somebody else. So it requires an amazing amount of power. We know that Fen was there. We know that there's a rune. So was Naolin Tirish?
No. Of course not. He's fighting against the Tirish rebellion. I have this note. Right. Naolin cannot be Tirish.
So, who did the rune?
Yeah.
Tairn was there. It all smells like something totally different happened, and that maybe Brennan wasn't hit. Like, maybe he wasn't the one who was dying. Maybe Naolin was dying. I don't know, but the whole thing smells off. And I kind of think, I think the most likely scenario is exactly what you just described. But I think a secondary, like what I would put money on if that didn't happen, is that this is actually a cover-up for something else that happened that would have made it necessary for Brennan to disappear and for Naolin to disappear. I'm still sold on Naolin being Venin. Just like the logic doesn't add up the way that it should, right?
Well, here's my question if Naolin is Venin. It's the same question we started the episode with. How does that explain Tairn, right? Because if Naolin is alive... So, first of all, we have a quote, right? Like, There's a clear hierarchy. This is from one of the epigraphs in Fourth Wing. There's a clear hierarchy among the most powerful, and deference is paid to the elders, but I have not been able to discern how it is they make laws for themselves, or at what point a dragon decided to bond with only one rider rather than go for the better odds with two, right?
Totally.
So it is totally within the realm of possibility. Holy shit, I just had a thought. That Naolin
is still bonded
to Tairn. And we know that Tairn is sketchy as hell about Naolin, right? He
Yeah.
just calls him the one who came before. He doesn't say, he never says he's dead. Maybe he says he's dead.
He said once,
One time.
Fucked me up, honestly, because I was like so convinced.
Yeah.
He said, well, he didn't say it about Naolin. He said, I will not let another rider die who doesn't know their limits.
Right. And as previously mentioned, I call bullshit on Tairn only having two riders, but.
Yeah, right. Next episode on that.
Right. So, however, what we also know is dragons and their riders cannot be apart their bonded riders cannot be apart for very long. So if Tairn has bonded two riders, which I totally think was in the realm of possibility, that means Naolin has to be nearby, right? Like, so where is he?
They're still bonded.
If they're still bonded. Right. So where is he? Where is he hiding? Is he hiding at Basgaia? Where was Tairn for the past 5 years? Was he off with Naolin? We know Sigale was bonded to Xaden for 3 of those years, right? So presumably Tairn had to have been close to Basgaia. Sorry, for 2 of those years. Yes. Yeah. Presumably Tairn had to have been close to Basgaia for 2 of those years. That still leaves us 3 years of where was he. He also has that quote where Violet's like, I didn't think I would get this far. Tairn says, neither did I. That's unexplained. It's a moment of like shocking humility from Tairn. We don't know what that's about.
Well, I mean, 5 years and like his entire life before Naolin.
But if we're just focusing on Naolin for this episode.
Yeah, fine.
Yeah. I don't know. Could Naolin be disguised and be someone that we know, someone that we love? Maybe.
Yeah.
Like if sages and mavens can look like humans, can they look like other humans too? I don't know.
Yeah. And the same question is raised with Sigale and our Grandpa Ryerson theory, right? So like, I don't think that if there's an explanation, it would solve multiple problems that we're facing.
Yeah.
In terms of the 2 riders bonded to one dragon. But I think the interesting thing to me is Tairn knows so many answers to the questions that we have. Like he was there when Brennan died, allegedly.
Yeah.
And Naolin died, allegedly.
Must have been right there.
And someone had to know runes. Like someone had to do the runes or the rune. And we know the only other person that we know was there for sure was Fen.
So Tairn has in theory known, I guess people realize this. Maybe I'm just having a light bulb moment. Tairn knew Brennan was alive the whole time.
Correct. Yeah.
And Violet's mad at him about keeping the Venin secret? Like, fuck that, Violet.
Tairn knows so much. So does Sigale. Potentially Xaden. But mostly Tairn.
Well, okay, so we know, again, the Dragons episode is helping, but this helps my theory. Kaori has a quote at the beginning of Fourth Wing, which we'll get into the implications of this, but basically we would not have won the Tirish Rebellion if not for Tairn. Like, Tairn fucked shit up in the Tirish Rebellion, which, why would he do that? But that implies to me that he is pretty drained at the end of this battle, or whenever this battle is happening, and probably does not have enough energy to give Brennan to mend himself, right?
Yeah. It is like, there's so many interesting questions about like Tairn fought against them. Brennan ended up with them after that whole thing occurred.
And we know that Sigale doesn't like Brennan. And we know that Sigale doesn't like people. It's not about being Venin, right? She's still with Xaden after Xaden turns Venin, but she doesn't like people who fuck up Tairn, right?
Yeah.
So like, if Brennan did something to fuck up Naolin, which in turn fucked up Tairn.
I still think, I mean, in terms of what really happened to Naolin, I still think that the overwhelming case is that he's Venin, especially corroborated by the way that Brennan reacted to Xaden. And also Sigale had a rider before Grandpa Ryerson. Like, who the heck was that?
Yeah.
There's a lot.
Yeah.
I like how we talk about, Grandpa Ryerson is confirmed.
No. That was her rider. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I don't really have anything else on that one.
Okay. You covered everything that I had as well.
All right. Precog Corner time. I guess you already did yours.
Did we not add? I thought we added the one who watches.
I have that question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
I didn't highlight it.
I think we phrased it as who leads the Venin. Do either of us think that General Daramore the one who watches. I just gave myself away. Anyways, I think the one who watches leads the Venin. Do you?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I think the one who watches is General Daramore, shockingly.
I have that as one of my options.
So first of all, let's just start with the one who watches, right? Like, who leads the Venin? Do we have a reason to believe that any one person leads the Venin? We get continuous references to a him that is often presented in italics, so is clearly somebody important. There is some leader that everybody is deferential to. We've heard this person called the one who watches. Abby has said before that she thinks he's a like oracle type vibe that's just sitting somewhere with glazed over eyes
the
and
name of
everything
that guy
in the word.
is the three-eyed raven.
Yeah, the three-eyed raven. The three-eyed raven. She thinks he's the three-eyed raven. So we know that there is this figure that exists amongst the Venin. I think the one who watches, if I'm a betting woman and I'm picking someone, is General Daramore. We don't really know what ignited the first Great War. I'm also going to get into crackpot theory here.
It's fine.
Are you sure?
Do it.
Okay, this is my Precog Corner theory and the last question, and then Abby will rebuttal with anything else that she has. We don't really learn much about what ignited the Great War for sure. Here's what we know, right? We know that the Six were the defenders. They were the defense. We know that General Daramore was the offense, and we also know that dragons bonded riders for the first time during the Great War. The only one whose name we know is Thoreau. Is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah, the black dragon.
The only one... Yeah, the first black dragon to bond. We know bonded during the Great War. There were the first six riders. They were on the defense. And then we know that General Daramore was the offense. My Precog Corner theory is that the seventh dragon breed, the Irid, was supposed to bond General Daramore and didn't, because Irids don't believe that humans should be bonded. And General Daramore lost his shit and channeled from the earth. And then, since then, General Daramore has sired basically every Venin that is currently existing and continues to lead that whole organization. General Daramore felt, this power is rightfully mine. There's a seventh breed. They're not bonding. They're a gatekeeper. They're evil. I think he's led the Venin ever since. I think he may have a signet where he sees it all, but I also think it's possible that if he leads every Venin, then he essentially is sage of every Venin to ever exist, and he may just see everything through them.
Okay, I have two follow-ups. I totally think it's interesting. We kind of got to the same place, but in a different way. But we know the Venin, well, the origin story implies there's Venin.
But when does the origin story happen?
Great question.
What was before the Great War? If someone bonded a rider for the first time during the Great War, we also hear someone bonding a dragon.
During the origin story. Great point. There are things that happened, like we know Andarna's egg was laid before the Great War, right? There are clearly things that happen.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna get into it with dragons. I think it is tied. I think it is one of the original 6 or 7. I think you're right about that because, and we'll get into this with the Irids. I basically have 2 theories about why the Irids left, right? And we know that the Irids left basically right after they fired the Basgiath Wardstone, because there is a letter from Lyra in the same time frame where she is at Orisha and she has a second wardstone and she says, like, basically, I am ready if the others ever return. And now we can assume that that is about the Irids based on what we know about how to fire wardstones, right? So basically, original wardstone is fired, something happens, Irids get pissed as fuck and they forsake humanity. They're like, we're done here. We're leaving it. Well, they already left Andarna, but basically we're done here. We're not coming back. We are never bonding anyone. I like your idea of the 7th rider. My idea was basically just it's Warwick, because we know Warwick's kind of a dick, that Warwick turns and becomes General Daramore.
And he didn't want anyone to know how to raise the wards.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I have 2 quotes to go on that. Or I have 3 quotes to go on that. So first, with all these are all quotes written by Warwick. With all we've sacrificed for this kingdom, we'd better be able to defend it. That implies to me a sacrifice. Any means necessary, basically, right, to defend it.
Yeah.
It was never our continent from the very beginning. It was theirs, and we were simply allowed to live here. I at first thought this was about the Venin, but now I think it's about the dragons.
I think it's about the dragons.
And this, to me, speaks to some resentment, right? Like, he is starting to, right, he is not really happy about the way that things are going. Maybe he isn't happy with the dragon he bonded. Maybe he's not happy with, I don't know. But this seems to me that this is resentment, and that could lead him down the path of Veninism. And then the last So Violet talks about when she's reading the journals that there's a lot of time, or like the tales of the original six, not necessarily the journals. There's a lot of time spent talking about the love lives of the original six. We only have 2 of the original 6 that we know, Warwick and Lyra. I think we can assume that they were in love because of 2 lines. So the first one is what I just mentioned about if I am to be court-martialed. She mentioned something in there about Warwick disagreeing with her ideologies. We know that Warwick thought that only the Navarre wordstone should be fired. Lyra thought that basically Griffin Rider should be able to come in too.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing kills powerful, unshakable love than opposing ideologies. That's the ideology we're presented with, right? But Jack also has an ideology, right? Jack's ideology is that dragons should not get to decide who can and cannot have magic. If that is actually the ideology that Warwick is talking about, then I think we could totally be getting set up that he was an original 6 and then he turned Venin, maybe became General Daramore. I don't know how the timeline for that works
General
out.
Daramore. Interesting.
Yeah, maybe.
I was gonna ask how General Daramore like could have fit in, because we are told that the Great War was the 6 versus General Daramore.
Yeah.
So
I don't know.
If someone else defected, and which totally could have happened, right? Like if Warwick defected, led the Venin, then was General Daramore just his general?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right, because we know that Berwyn is also a general. Like in Resin, Tairn says a general recognizes another general. That's their general. So why would General Daramore be so important?
Yeah, which is, by the way, a case against Grandpa Ryerson being Berwyn, unless he became a general.
I mean, I'm assuming he can become a Venin general.
Anyways, yeah, I mean, it totally could be Warwick.
Look, well. I literally have as my last theory, I just realized this, mysterious 7th rider, Irid Bonder, in parentheses. Yeah, okay, so I have that theory too. I just forgot about it entirely. Yeah, we know that there were 7 dragons, not 6, who fired the first wardstone. We know that the Irids left extremely soon after firing the first wardstone, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
And it makes, it feels like there is an Irid versus Venin trope that's coming for us.
And I have so much more to say about that when we get to.
Same. Yeah. So we can do it in the next episode. Okay.
All right. I still have my Precog Corner.
Yeah. Go for your Precog Corner theory. Yeah.
All right. My Precog Corner theory is that Basgiath is a secret Venin factory, and that it is designed to create Venin, not to create riders. Right. I have quotes to back me up. So when they're doing the fight at the beginning of Onyx Storm, the fight we've talked about so many times where Violet gives her speech, Dane says to Riddick, find your squad and de-escalates at all costs. And Riddick says, if only we were taught those techniques, right? So they are not taught to de-escalate. They're only taught to fight. Like, do not de-escalate. There's no peacekeeping, right? It's just fight. Maybe this place is exactly what the Griffin Flyer called it, a death factory. Right. So the Griffin Flyers are like, it is so crazy that you guys die on conscription day. Like we just land in water and then swim out and try again. Like your methods are crazy. The first year is when some of us lose our lives. The second year is when the rest of us lose our humanity. It's all part of the process of turning us into effective weapons. And don't forget there's second, that's the mission here, desensitizing us to death. And then there's more quotes. But basically there are so many quotes about how Basgiath just turns you into this soulless monster. And that's its like actual goal. We know that the leadership at Basgiath has been infiltrated by Venins. This could also be why the dragons have kind of stopped bonding, because they're seeing that what Basgiath is doing is actually priming you to become a really effective Venin rather than becoming a really effective rider. So I think this is also part of the recruitment, right? Like you teach people, win at all costs, have no soul, have no emotional connections, be a machine. And then it's not so hard to become a soulless Venin, right? Your soul's not worth that much. And there's that quote about the problem with humans is that they usually think their souls are worth having all that power. I don't remember the exact words, but it's something like that. So that's kind of my Precog Corner theory, is that we're going to find out that Basgiath was corrupt all along and was always meant to turn humans into more effective Venin.
I buy that. I also think all of the quotes that you laid out also allude to the fact that magic is corruption in a way. Like, regardless of whose magic you're touching, like, it takes your humanity. And so, yeah, I agree. I think it would be crazy if that came out to be its original intent, but I think
original intent is crazy. I thought it had just been like corrupted over the years, but
original intent would be crazy. But I think in actuality, like, that's effectively what it's turned out to be, right? Like, Yeah, agree. Okay.
Okay, anything else?
I'm excited to talk about
I'm
dragons.
excited to talk about dragons too. I don't know if you guys have picked up on this, but obviously we're recording Venin and Dragons back to back. That's why we keep talking about dragons. Sorry to ruin the podcast magic.
But also, there's no way that we could have researched one without researching the other,
Yeah,
in my
I agree.
opinion.
If you want to listen to them back to back, I encourage you to do that too, because there's going to be a lot of references and crossover. As I'm saying at the end of the episode when you've probably already listened to it, my bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll be out in a week, so it's fine.
Yeah. Anything fun you're reading?
So, like 3 weeks ago, I said at the end of the episode that I think at the end of episode 3, which is coming out tomorrow, sorry to spoil the podcast magic, that I was thinking about reading Quicksilver, and then I read it immediately after that. So I've been done with it for weeks. That sucked up my life for a solid 4 weekdays, which was too fast, and I stayed up too late. So we'll at some point record like a reaction episode to Quicksilver.
I finished
because
Quicksilver this morning, so it's very fresh in my mind. It was very
a fun one.
Very, very fun. I agree.
And then I picked up Crescent City because I think I need to be hurt in order to not lose myself too hard to the Empyrean. So I'm like 300 pages in to Crescent City, which every single one of those books is like 600 to 850 pages. So I've got some runway. What about you?
Yeah, I finished Quicksilver this morning. That was super fun. I'm shamelessly pushing you for us to do a reaction pod to that. So we'll see if that happens today.
Yeah, we could do it.
Yeah, we'll see how much energy we have. That's pretty much it. It was really fun. I also watched the Severance season 2 finale, which I thought was an amazing work of art. I thought that was one of the best episodes of TV I'd ever seen. And I really didn't like the episode the week before. So it was a big 180 for me. But yeah, Quicksilver is really fun. More to come on that one, I think. I don't want to give too much away.
Where are you getting all this time? I've not even started watching Severance.
Work from
I
home.
watched season 1. Yeah, fair. I had something else I feel like I was going to say. So I don't know if any of our listeners listen to Arizona, the band that made the song Freaking Out. I don't know. They're spelled A space R space I space C O. If you're going to look them up. But they went on their farewell tour because they're ending, which is sad. So I went to see them. They're great. Would recommend. Unfortunately, they're not going to be putting out anything new from here on out. But that was fun.
Yeah. We just find things at the end. We're like, yeah, you should do this. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, as always, if you have any feedback on our episodes, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, email us at dragonsinthedetailspod@gmail.com. We're always happy to hear from you guys. And, like, comment, subscribe, etc. I've been told that leaving reviews or leaving stars on Spotify is really good. So if you guys want to do that, that'd be awesome. Thank you for everyone who's been listening. There's a surprising number of you. I thought like 2 people would listen to this, and there's more than that. So I'm pretty happy. So shout out to you guys. It's great. Very happy that you're here. And we love doing this. So thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.
I need to eat something.